Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is This Week in Thought, episode 11. And it's Wednesday, May 24th now, May 24th, 2023, in the evening. And as always, three of us. I'm Chunky. In the middle, that's Kassig. And over on the right, that's Redmed. And so it's been a little while, I guess, since we published an episode. Published a bunch of them there, kind of, I think, in the last couple weeks. And we've been talking offline in our chat thread about upcoming topics, things we want to talk about. And we actually have, there's a bunch of them that we kind of discovered that we want to talk about. But right at the top of that list, before anything else, we realized that sort of the most significant topic that we kind of had to cover next was a topic about the value of life. And I mean, specifically, of course, we're talking about the value of human life, but probably it's a broader conversation a little bit, which is the value of all life in general, all living things or things that we consider to be alive, and that might be, something greater even than just biological things. I'm not sure, but I think really kind of the direction that we're headed with this is we want to know specifically, is human life valuable, and if so, why? And then I think there are further questions like, are all human lives equally valuable, or are some more valuable than others? And really, I mean, we're kind of getting into the heart of ethics here. This is not anything that hasn't been discussed, 1,000 times before throughout history by pretty much every philosopher that wrote on ethics, and pretty much every student of philosophy that's ever read about it. Probably most people have thought about this in their lives. For those that haven't, though, ever taken time to really evaluate why it is that humans tend to value human life, hopefully this discussion that we're going to have tonight will be illuminating. And I'll kind of get this started with a particular notion of mine, and then see how you guys sort of respond to that. I'll tell you that I think there's a broadly held belief by many people, I would say most people, that at least some human lives, maybe most human lives, have value. And the reason I say that is because going back to antiquity, just about every society you can think of, I think, had a law that they enacted outlawing murder. So they say, you could take a biblical approach. 10 commandments 5,000 years ago, thou shalt not kills, right there on the list of 10 things supposedly that came from the mind of the divine creator. Is one of the things is that thou shalt not kill, which is really the negative way of phrasing the notion that human life is valuable, so valuable that it should be protected and preserved and promoted. But setting religion and that particular religious context aside, just about every society, I think, has, in one form or another, codified the notion that murder should be outlawed, that it's wrong for one person to kill another. And in many societies, if that law is violated, if somebody goes and kills, let's say, their neighbor or some contemporary, there's punishment. I mean, punishments ranging from, they call it manslaughter. They could call it first-degree murder, second-degree murder. I mean, you could be looking at life in prison is a pretty common thing if you're convicted of this. Sometimes they even say murder is so bad that the only punishment we can give you is to murder you right back. Very, very, again, old-school biblical concept, this notion of an eye for an eye. So if you take away this such a great value, which is another human life, the only way there can be justice, this notion of justice, is if we, the society, take away your life in return. And so ever since I was a kid, I was fascinated by the concept that human life is perceived as being valuable. So valuable that they make laws that they're willing to punish you by taking away your life if you take away the life of another. Some religions, for example, go a step further and say it's not just other lives that you're not permitted to take. You're not even permitted to take your own. You're not even permitted to take your own. They consider that to be a sin. For example, in Catholicism and in Christianity, it's considered to be one of the worst kinds of sin would be to take one's own life, to commit suicide. And to me, I think It's a topic worth discussing. It's a topic worth discussing because it's worth understanding why it is that this is such a widely held notion, that these lives have values, that the life of the self has value and the life of others, contemporaries, have value. It goes beyond that into like hypothetical future lives. Do unborn children, unconceived children, do they have value also? And then it begs a question of if life has value, how do we ever justify taking a life? Things like committing capital punishment, or murder that's done in the context of combat, when a soldier is sent off and commanded to kill someone that they declare an enemy combatant. How is that justified in the context of life is valuable and murder should be outlawed? So to me, kind of the central question is, well, do we agree with the notion that murder is wrong? And if so, why? What is it about the person and their life that we think is so valuable that murder should be outlawed? So I kind of want to open it up to the floor and see what you guys think.
I think historically, it was more usually. It was like, oh, all lives are important. Yeah, that's fine. But mostly, it was our lives are. Our in-group is important. Those other people, less so. Yeah, there's very. I think a lot of societies say, oh yeah, all human lives are valuable, but they pick and choose because they don't really want to take care of all of humanity because it's expensive. In theory, it might be a lot cheaper than everybody thinks, but I think that's kind of what we're talking about here generally.
Well, I don't believe, well, it shouldn't be expensive. Thousands of years ago, they didn't use a monetary system to support the lives of the people of their own tribe. So what's the difference in saying that we can support the people of our own neighborhood? We should be able to do
Sure.
that. Everybody's life is valuable. Everything's life is valuable. I don't mean like this person is so valuable to me that I'm going to do everything I can I'll even pay people to keep this person alive. I don't mean that value. I mean, everybody has a value to the point that without this person, this thing cannot be done or won't get done as well as if they were doing it. I think the value of the life of all biological entities on this planet hold basically the same value as each other because we all depend on each other for life. I think I've said this before that I depend on the pig depends on potato depends on the worm for the fertilizer, which is me at the end of my life. So I am valuable to the worm, which in sense is valuable to the potato, then to the pig, then to the next human. So everything has a life force. So everything is as valuable to each other as they should be.
Yeah, I think that interconnectedness is a big part of the whole argument, and I believe that human life does have value, and partially it's because of the interrelatedness of all life on Earth.
Wow. Okay.
Now,
Go ahead.
sorry. Now, when it comes to my life versus an enemy combatant, and we're in the middle of a war, I don't think that's justified. I don't think me killing that other person is justified because we're fighting over something that's typically meaningless for the life that we have. Let's take a war. We're going to war over this little plot of land. It's mine. I say it's mine, but you say it's yours. So we're going to fight each other to prove it's one of ours. Well, that does no good because we've just ruined our whole system of life by destroying each other. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think there are some, like in theory, that sounds good, but in practice, I think that's not how it goes. I mean, look at World War II. I think you said all lives are valuable. Maybe you said all human lives are equally valuable, and that murder, even of enemy combatants, isn't justified. Well, you got guys like Hitler and Mussolini, and their attitude is, the lives that we deem valuable are valuable, and we'll kill absolutely everybody we don't think is valuable. Oh, and we're going to continue to spread until we control the entire world with our ideology. I mean, if we, let's say we had taken an attitude of pacifism, like Chamberlain tried to do, in Britain before Churchill, and just appeasement. Okay, well, they just took this territory. Oh, well, they just took that. Well, at least they haven't taken ours yet. All you're doing is feeding the demon. I mean, eventually you have to confront the demon. If we hadn't confronted the demon, we'd all be speaking German right now, and that is those of us that weren't killed by the purges that Hitler and his regime would have enacted on all of us. So you talk about, are all lives equally valuable? Well, I don't think Hitler's life is valuable. I think it's the exact opposite.
Although,
Well, I'm sorry, but here comes my controversial statement. Without Hitler, some things would not have been discovered. Without his insane mind to get these insane people behind him to do human experiments, some things in the medical field would not have been discovered because it's unethical to experiment on human beings.
well,
Well, he's sorry.
well,
Would not have been
well,
discovered, or would not have been discovered as expediently as they were. I mean,
Possibly either.
possibly. I would suggest that probably in the absence of human experimentation, there's other less expedient animal experimentation that can be done, which will yield the same results. Not as fast, but also, one might argue, a medical ethicist might argue, more ethically from a medical standpoint. Because, again, this is Immanuel Kant. Humans are to be treated as ends in and of themselves, not merely as means to an end. That's Kant's second formulation of the categorical imperative, meaning that that's the foundation of your medical ethics that says you don't experiment on humans. The other thing I want to mention real quick is Karl Popper. Karl Popper addressed this in the middle of the 20th century. He talked about whether or not we should extend, as a society who holds tolerance as a value, whether we should extend tolerance to all people and all ideologies. And he said, no, actually, you can't extend tolerance to those that are intolerant, because if you do so, they will grow, and that will lead to the extinction of toleration. So he said, it's, even though it seems like a paradox, yeah, if you want to preserve tolerance, you must never tolerate the intolerant. And to me, that's the justification for why we had to go to war with Hitler, why we had to kill Hitler, destroy his regime, do away with his ideology, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think that's just Hitler. I think that's true of anybody that, well, really advocates an ideology that poses an existential threat to humans because it is founded on intolerance or on jingoism, really. I mean, if you get down to what the core of Hitler's philosophy was, it was racist self-righteousness, like promoting his idea of his own superior genetics over everybody else, I think.
Okay, but that was in the 40s, in the 1940s. What if he were to come about today? Couldn't we just, I don't know, medicate him? And now all of a sudden we don't have that issue.
well, unless someone decides that they can make him money, in which case they'll, take him out of the institution, spray him off, throw him in a suit. He's the next candidate for whatever,
I mean, that is possible for that to happen, but I don't know. And as far as human experimentation, I'd much rather see that than an experimenting on animals.
Yeah.
Because they don't give consent.
I think, and it should be voluntary. If you believe that your magical formula is the best magical formula in the world, have at it, man. Otherwise, there's an entire pharmacopoeia in nature that can solve most problems. Use those first. Stop torturing animals.
Oh, when you say informed consent, so you're talking about, let's say there's some medical researcher out there that says, hey, we've got this new drug. We think it's going to be beneficial, but we don't know. We have to test it. And so it requires testing on human subjects. And so you're saying informed consent, like they go out and they advertise and say, hey, we'll pay you to come submit and be a test subject. And then that person says, oh, okay, I voluntarily give you permission to experiment on me. You're saying that's more justified than experimenting on animals?
I would say more justified. Using currency probably isn't the most justified method, but it gets into like paying for plasma. Yeah, we need plasma. Yeah, the people need money. Yeah, there are better ways of doing it, but until we find that way, or until we transition over to that way.
There are people who actually make a living out of being test subjects.
Sure. And it screws them up.
Sure it does. But it's better than taking a pack of dogs.
Yes.
And subjecting them to cancer, which they didn't have. So we just gave them cancer in order to figure out if this cancer drug fixes that cancer.
Okay.
We're going
How,
to kill all.
how about rats? So you like dogs, it sounds like, and you don't want to do testing on dogs. How do you feel about doing testing on rats? What if we said we could get the same results testing on rats as on dogs or humans?
No.
Okay,
No.
so what if we said it's just cockroaches? How do you feel about testing on cockroaches?
I don't like them, but no, I don't think it's right. It doesn't have. You're making a drug for a human body. Test it on a human body. Don't test it on an ape, which has a very similar body type and structure to a human body. It's not a human body. If you want to make a drug for a human, test it on a human.
I'd feel the same way.
Yeah, but okay, so you guys are saying that to fuel your human testing programs, you would need a steady supply of people that are so desperate for money, let's say, that they're willing to sacrifice their own health in exchange for the meager currency to continue existing and potentially suffer long-term medical effects from the untested drug? That you think that's preferable to testing on cockroaches?
I don't. The testing I'm talking about isn't. I'm going to. Hey, Chunky, here I'm going to give you $50,000. We're going to test this drug on you, but first we have to give you this cancer and let it grow in you for 10 years, and then we can give you the drug to see if it kills the cancer. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the person that already has this cancer. We have this test, we have this drug that we think is going to do better than the last one.
Yes.
Can we use it on you? That's the consent that I'm talking about. We don't.
You're describing now a very specific kind of medical testing, which I would say isn't so much just, hey, I'm a pharmaceutical company and I need a bunch of test subjects, like human lab rats to test on. What you're talking about is these are people who maybe have, like, for example, a terminal illness, no other alternatives, and they're saying, well, this is an untested area of treatment, like type of treatment, and you could be in part of a pilot program to be a test subject. Now it may fail, could kill you faster, but odds are you're going to die pretty soon anyway, right?
Yep.
Right.
So that makes perfect sense. I don't know that that's really controversial at all, because you're offering hope to somebody who is on the verge of death anyway from a terminal illness. What I'm talking about is experimenting with new kinds of treatments. Maybe not new kinds of treatments. Maybe new kinds of, how about genetic modifications to enhance, let's say, quality and duration of life, like DNA hacking type treatments.
Volunteer.
Oh, I don't. No.
All volunteer.
I personally don't feel.
What? What are you saying?
I don't think the human life should be extended beyond what it is meant to be.
Meant to be. Boy, I've heard a lot of people say that. Meant to be.
What I mean, I don't mean like you're meant to be 75 years old. You're meant to be 84 years old, because we don't know that. I don't remember the research, but I have heard research say that the human body is not supposed to live past a certain age. It just does not function after that, because it starts to shut down at the age of 35 to 40. So you're going to have to constantly replace body parts. Well, and where are you going to get those body parts?
Okay, so you're saying that, let me understand it. You're saying that you don't think human life should be artificially extended. Its duration should not be extended by artificial means. A person shouldn't do things to extend their life beyond what nature would otherwise dictate for them in terms of their lifespan.
Deep down, yes.
Yes, you think that's true? Well, okay. So my first question is, after you defecate, do you wash your hands with soap and water?
Yeah.
And why do you do that?
It's because I was taught to, really.
Okay. And is it simply blind obedience, or do you agree with the reasoning behind why you were taught to do that?
Initially, it was blind obedience. Now it's kind of like, yeah, I do it to, limit the amount of germ exposure to everybody else.
So it has nothing to do with like wanting to not have fecal bacteria on your hands before you eat your next meal?
It's already there. Whether I wash it or not, it's already there.
Okay. All right. So before you cross the street, do you look both ways, or do you just walk right out into the street?
I look both ways.
And why do you do that?
Self-preservation.
So if you didn't have that self-preservation instinct, how long would you have lived otherwise?
Oh, probably not long.
Okay, so you're desiring to preserve yourself by preventing what you think is premature termination.
But if you take the cross your street incident, that's not natural death. That's death by some other means. I'm getting run over by a car. I'm not having a heart attack.
Do you
And and
do you
and I
exercise?
no,
Don't
I
exercise at all, huh? Okay.
very 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 little.
So you've got your foot pedal to the metal over the early death cliff. You're just heading right for the early
I'm not.
demise cliff.
It's not. I wouldn't say it's early demise. It's the demise that I'm meant to have.
See, this concept of meant to have. I think it's a little disingenuous because I think that you do all kinds of things to preserve your life. You do anything that you think is within a reasonable amount of effort to expend to prevent early termination of your life. You look both ways before you cross the street because you don't want to die at age 40 something. Even though, as you said, biologically, you should have been dead, what, 10, 15 years ago? I mean, you get vaccines because you don't want to die from a virus when just by having the vaccine, which is a simple thing for you to do, you can extend your life decades beyond what the design limitations of your body was, which was 30 to 40 years. I mean, by that theory, if we say, well, meant to be, okay, meant to be, that's about 30 years. We're all on borrowed time. All three of us are a decade beyond the design like specifications of our body. We're all in overtime right now. This is sudden death overtime, and we're staving it off by washing our hands, watching what we eat, looking both ways before we cross the street, taking vaccines. I mean, we do all kinds of extraordinary things to preserve and lengthen our life. So it's just strikes me as a little bit. It's a little bit disingenuous to say, well, I think, I'm supposed to die when it's meant to be, or I'm only supposed to live as long as it's meant to be. Well, no, you have agency. You have input in how long you're meant to live every time you make a decision that prevents your early death, which, by the way, is exactly what the world had in mind for you when it created you. It expected you to live maybe 30 years. 15 years to be old enough to reproduce, and then another 15 years to protect your offspring until they were old enough to reproduce. And that's it. That's why 30 years. That's why humans only lived 30 years before we had medical technology. You got to make babies, and then you got to live long enough to get those babies to the age they can make babies, and then after that you can die. But anyway.
The 35 thing. I've been reading about that, and apparently that's skewed because of neonatal. There were so many children who didn't make it to viability age. If once you lived to 10, you 40, 50, 60 was in reach. It was not as if you were serf, then obviously. But if you were a noble and you lived past childhood, you could expect to live 50, 60. All of those statistics are skewed by early infant death, which was real high back then. So much so to completely skew the statistics.
Well, the 30 to 40 year, 35 to 40-year-old thing that I was talking about is the actual shrinking of your body.
Oh, okay.
Your brain shrinks, everything shrinks on your body. People have actually lost inches because their body has shrunk.
But
that's what I'm talking about. It's the actual mechanical part of your body is not meant to live as long as we're trying to get it to live.
Yeah, and I'm for use all the tricks, live as long as you can. In a good way. You don't want to be like God Emperor hooked up to the robot throne.
Do you not? I mean,
if they could project my mind into a VR world, sure. Like if I'm just a mummy in a casket, but my brain is in virtual world wherever, sure.
I will tell you, it took a weird turn to get here, but I think we're right at the heart of it now, because the question is, why does a human want to live at all? Why does a human want to live 30 years, 40 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, 1 year? Why does a human want to live one moment? I mean, think about this. Albert Camus, he famously said that the literal definition of the meaning of life is that which is preventing you from committing suicide in this moment. So whatever it is that's keeping you from killing yourself, that's your meaning of life. And I say, okay, look at somebody like us. we're some middle-aged guys. We've been over 4 decades on this planet. There's like thousands of hours, like millions of moments where there were reasons we didn't kill ourselves. We could have if we wanted to, but we've all chosen not to end our lives. We've chosen to continue living. We want to keep living. And I'll tell you, it's becoming more apparent for me as I'm getting older, because since I turned 40, I'm having all kinds of medical problems that's making my quality of life decline. But yet I still persist. I still say, well, I think I want to live another day. I think I'm going to maybe take the medicine, and I'm going to maybe take it easy, but I'm also going to try to eat a little better, and I'm going to do some exercise, because it turns out there's enough interesting and valuable about life and life experiences that I want to continue. And here's the thing, I don't think that's true of just me. I think that's true of all of us that are alive. What do you guys think? Do you think there is egoist value of life? Every person that hasn't killed themselves values their own life? Is that a true statement?
Yeah. Even if they consider the meaning of their life just to help others, they value that ability and persist to perpetuate it. So yeah,
Red,
I think
99%, yeah.
say it again.
99%, yeah.
yeah. When you break down people's motivations, it's difficult. Even the altruistic ones, you can break down to selfish desires.
Well, I mean, selfish or selfless is a separate debate. The mere fact that you continue to persist, to
Sure.
me, says you value your life. You value something about your life enough that you don't want it to end. Not yet. Yep. And you haven't wanted it to end for every moment of your life up to this point. You've continued to go, I think I'm going to live another moment. I think I'm going to live I want to keep living. I'm going to eat, I'm going to sleep, I'm going to try to be healthy. I want to extend my life a little bit. I mean, Red, you said 99%, but I don't know what your reservation is or why you're not committed to that idea.
There are people who have lost complete hope. They just haven't done it yet.
Yes. Oh, I see what you're saying. Sure. There are the suicidal who are not yet to the final point of the last decision.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
So I don't think that they can say to themselves that I'm living it for this moment, for the next moment.
That's
fair. I
fair.
don't see them saying that.
That's fair. Suicide it's still a big, I don't know what the statistics are, but it's a larger percentage than you think of the population will choose to make that decision in a given year. But like you said, Red, I think probably 99% of us go, nah,
Yeah.
I don't think I want to prematurely terminate. I think I want to ride this out and see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
There's the quick way, and there's also the slow way that happens quite a bit, where people are like, I may stay alive, and that's cool, but that's not going to stop me from opening up the bar at 12 a.m. and staying there till 2 every night. And it's like, yeah, I kind of want to half live, but I'm not going to do anything healthy to keep that going. So I think that's kind of I think it's all on a spectrum,
I think you're right, Kassig, and I remember I had an argument once where I said that I think the majority of people actually do commit suicide, because suicide, the definition is just the willful termination of one's life, but it doesn't specify how. I mean, yeah, there's what you think of as like the immediate types of suicide. I mean, I'm not going to go into it, but we can all read the statistics as to what people do to kill themselves right now.
Sure.
But if a person lives to age 99 and they eat very healthy, and yet they've chosen to die at that time because they've lived such a healthy lifestyle, how is that any less of a choice of how to terminate your life?
Yeah.
I mean,
You're right.
Yeah, it's an active or a passive choice, regardless. Everything you do,
right.
is either you could break everything down to, does this help preserve my biological existence or not? Or it's a percentage too, you're getting calories from that ice cream bar, but you're getting a lot of other bad stuff too. So you gotta, the majority of it's bad, so you gotta list it as or non helping the biological organism to continue.
Right.
I'd label that as bad for this argument.
I would too, yeah. So, or detrimental. Yeah, detrimental.
Yeah, detrimental scale.
So I guess what I'm getting at is if for the vast majority of us, we're on, let's say, the slow burn toward a long life and death somewhere in our geriatric time. In other words, we want to spend as much time as we can having experiences of life, continuing to have experiences of life. My question then is, why? Why is it that we all want to live so much? maybe we all have different reasons, but what are the reasons that we all want to live? Why do we all think our lives are more valuable than, or they're valuable enough that we want to preserve them? We want them to continue. Why do we say our lives are so valuable?
It's mostly enjoying what we enjoy and even witnessing what we don't enjoy. But I do think it's ultimately what we view as valuable, we try to perpetuate.
It's hedonism.
Normally, you can have trauma and, shadow stuff where you self-defeat yourself. But generally, we try to do things that are what we view as beneficial to path our life journey, however we conceive that, I guess.
It's hedonism. As Chunky put it,
Yep.
we live for hedonism. That's just right down to the point. We live for the stuff we enjoy, no matter what it is. No matter how you enjoy whatever it is, that's what we live for.
And even if it can be painful, and we can appreciate the pain as part of it, and so it's like you can value a concept, helping the poor. So you go out and work 1,000 hours a week and make yourself miserable and all. But in the end, you view it as valuable because you view that ideal of helping the poor as valuable, so you're willing to suffer for it.
God, yeah,
And
that's
how much you're willing to suffer for it kind of plays into it too. Like with exercise, like I like living, I don't like being miserable exercising every 5 seconds. So I'll find my own, hopefully, middle path to get the most goodness or whatever you want out of it with the least amount of pain.
yeah. So is it fair to say? Would you guys agree that it's fair to say that the thing that the humans, the 99% of us that want to live to a ripe old age, the reason we all continue to exist and preserve our lives is that we desire to have more experiences? Would you say
Yep.
that's a fair characterization?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good baseline.
Yeah, so, I mean, so to me, that's the foundation of the value that I have for human life, is that it's capable of having experiences. And I'll tell you, that's why I don't value the life of, let's say, a dog as much as a human, because I don't think that the dog has, let's say, the richness, the self-reflective level, the conceptual, abstract notion of experience the way a human does, even when they have the same type of experience. I mean, a human eats a bowl of ice cream, a dog eats a dog ice cream or a dog treat. They're having the same visceral experience, but I think the human is experiencing a more abstract and complex type of pleasure than the dog. And I know it's a tough one to prove because the dog's not exactly answering our questions about the level of abstractness and joy that it's experiencing from eating the treat.
And you see, the reason why I value animal lives more is because I think it's the same experience, except humans put words on it. I'm eating ice cream, and the dog isn't. I do think we do have a more rich, depending idea of eating the bowl of ice cream. But I think the animal might enjoy it more because it's not busy putting words on its direct experience. So to me, I put the animals into the more, at least as valuable.
How about plants? How about plants? Now, they're not eating a bowl of ice cream, but I'll bet you plants have experiences. They experience sunlight, like warmth, rain.
If you can prove the complex thought, vegetarians are going to have a difficult time. And in all honesty, I think all things are alive. So every time you consume or breathe or anything like that, you're killing something. It's just a matter of figuring out a way to make it as little as possible.
How about
it's little killing for the energy.
how about cancer cells? How about a cancerous tumor? I mean, that's a group of cells that's living. Is it worth preserving its life because it might be having experiences?
No, because it threatens the rest of the life, and I think that you could play that out to where if the vast majority of humans are deemed a cancer, it needs to be fixed so the rest of the Gaia survives. And to me, that's the main. If humans, okay, I think we're screwing it up ourselves. We have some work to do. I think I would rather us go extinct now before destroying the Earth than later and ruining the Earth too, in case the dogs become sentient. If we go away, there might be others that, another species gains intelligence. And I'd love to see them be able to do that. And I don't want to see it ruined by our ecological destruction. So that being said, overpopulation's a tough one because you really do have to no one's going to take the step to go, okay, there's 75% too many people. They need to be gone. Nobody's going to do that.
Who decides which constitutes 75% to be terminated?
Right. So you've got to outproduce the problem.
For what it's worth, Kassig, I'm with you. I think most of our man-made problems, it's not demand-side solutions we should be looking at. It's not austerity or reducing our demand. It's supply-side solutions. We should be producing way, way, way more than we have. If we utilized our resources better, we can create more than enough abundance to take care of any problem, any man-made problem we have created in this world.
Here. And I think it's all man-made. It's all.
Yeah, but it's also
It's the
solvable.
99%.
It's
Yeah.
also solvable. Like,
Sure.
we got atmospheric scrubbers, large-scale atmospheric scrubbers. They're going to mechanically solve the global warming that they created 100 years ago. I mean, don't underestimate human ingenuity to solve problems, especially when it constitutes an existential threat.
Yeah, and I'm all for it. I'm all for, make humans better, preserve as much life as you can, make it as integrated as possible and as healthy as possible.
Red, I'll tell you, the thing you said earlier that I kind of wanted to get back to is the equality of value of living things. I think humans assign value to different things. For me, it's pretty cut and dry. It's all based upon complexity and self-reflective capabilities. So I have a clear hierarchy of values. I say humans are right at the top, maybe animals with brains but not as developed neocortexes, things like other mammals, dogs, for example, cats, apes. Really, there's a whole bunch of mammals that are kind of high up that chain of evolution, what I would say are next in line with value. But then, yeah, under that, bugs, yeah, I don't think they're as valuable. Less than that, plants. Plants, I'm not saying they have no value. They're incredibly useful to us, but I wouldn't sacrifice the life of an animal to preserve the life of a plant. I wouldn't do it.
Why not? If you don't preserve the life of said flower, this flower is key to the pollen production for a bee. That bee is key to the production of honey. That honey is key to the sweetening of your tea. So now that plant is extremely valuable because if you lose the bees, you lose all kinds of stuff.
Two reasons. First of all, that one particular plant isn't going to preserve or ruin the biosphere. I can kill one plant and there's 100 quadrillion other plants that will fill the vacuum of need for the plant part of the symbiosis between animals and plants. And then the second thing is it's real easy to make more plants. That's in fact what agriculture is. That's the backbone of human civilization. You want plants?
Okay.
Kill one and I can make 10 almost instantaneously. Not instantaneously, but at a much quicker rate than they're destroyed, I can make more of them. We know how to farm them. We've known how to do that for tens of thousands of years. So I don't worry about the particular plant.
I think we need to do that on a larger scale then. Now you've taken 50 plants that those bees rely on in North America. You've decimated those. Now the bees are gone. Now the flies overtake where the bees come in, but the flies don't pollinate. They just eat up crap. So now you don't have, so let's bring in some bees from this area to do that. Well, the problem with that is now all of a sudden you've got African murder hornets.
I'm with you, but I got to tell you
it's just everything is equally as valuable as the thing above. In your case, above and below it.
I think that you and I have more similar values than is immediately apparent, and I think we can figure it out if we dig down. Because the reason I suspect that you care about the bees being able to pollinate is because of what that pollination does for you, the human species, that depends upon the pollination done by the bees to keep the agriculture bountiful, which allows you and your contemporaries to be fed and therefore contributes to your quality of life. So I would say it's utilitarian for you as well. You say that you value these, what I'll call less complex organisms, less complex life. And I think you do, but I don't think you care about them as ends in and of themselves. I think you care about them only as a means to an end, and that end is preserving and promoting the welfare of your life and the lives of the humans, which I think you actually do value above all the other ones. I mean, the example you gave is, well, so let's say the bees go away because there's not enough pollination because we've destroyed the plants, and now flies come in and they fill that, let's say, vacuum in the ecosystem that was left by the vacating of the bees. Well, what's wrong with the flies? Well, the flies, they'll Hell, they'll consume just like the bees did. They'll spread and multiply all over the place. But what they won't do is the utilitarian function that you want, which is the pollination, which is really necessary to keep your supply chain of food going to you and all of your contemporary humans. Because ultimately, what you care about is the humans. I think it's not about the bees or the flies or the plants or anything underneath the humans on the hierarchy of value. All those things are important only because they are the tent poles that uphold humanity right at the top of that hierarchy, I think.
I think you can reduce it down a lot of times, sure. And I think, if I had to choose between running out in the street and grabbing a kid out of the street or a dog, I'd choose the kid. But I intentionally probably overstate the value of the lower intelligence stuff, primarily because it's pretty much completely discounted nowadays. And I think we need to move back towards it. So I know I tend to be more militant about it than perhaps I actually am, because I think it's important having an ecosystem.
That hypothetical you gave, you were talking about a street, but I'd heard it very often in like philosophy discussions or topics. They'll talk about the two train tracks, and there's a switch in between, and you can switch it either way, but you only have time to just make the switch. And on one side of the train tracks is one thing they want to determine the value of, and the other side is something else. So it's like a baby on one side and a dog on the other. And then you say, well, of course I would divert the train so it kills the dog, not because I don't like the dog, but because I value the baby more. And then you say, I've got the dog, and then I've got a plant. Well, of course I'm going to divert to the plant because I value the dog's life more than the plant.
Sure, and it gets interesting when you say, you have the train track and the two tracks. Okay, now you have all children or all bird.
I can't remember which philosopher it was. It might have been Godwin, but he was considering something similar, except he kind of took it to the next level and said, well, what if you're talking about two different people? For him, I think it was something like a burning building. And they said, well, he said, what if it was like this archbishop who was like a well-known intellectual figure at the time, or his own mother, the author's own mother? And he said, yeah, I'd have to save the archbishop. And I think that was sort of shocking to people. I mean, you're laughing, Red, because you think that it's, comical. It sounds like a punchline to a joke, I guess. But at the time, this was controversial. This very idea that he would value one human based on, let's say, their contribution to society more than somebody that had great value to him personally was like radical and revolutionary. And really, that's what I kind of want to talk about, because I don't know if, like, your reaction, Red, which I think a lot of people will have, which is sort of like, that's a comical joke. It's like a farcical like concept in ethics that's so far removed from reality I wouldn't do it. But it's interesting also when you think about it.
It kind of started off as, yeah, that's kind of funny. That's that's kind of humorous. But then as I was laughing about it, I'm like, you know what? That mother has already fulfilled her position in life. The archbishop, well, okay, he's not going to have children, but he is going to do something else. And who knows that my mother could be 95 and the archbishop could be 65. There's so many subjective things about it that you can make an argument for either one.
There are, and by the way, that is like the most anti-Kantian. That's like against the opposite of the categorical imperative, because it fails to treat every person as an end in themselves. But you know what, Red? When I read that, I had the same reaction as you, and I said that's the only rational conclusion. Because you have to put the value to humanity above the value to yourself. I think if you're going to call yourself a rational, moral agent, you have to care more about your whole species than you do about what's personally significant to you. And I had the same reaction. I thought, well, yeah, sorry, Mom. See ya. No offense. It's nothing personal, but the intellectual who is contributing to society is going to do more good, I think, have a bigger footprint of goodness, let's say, for the future of humanity than you are. Dear old Mom. Well, my mom's dead, but she was alive at the time, so it actually had meaning to me when I was considering the hypothetical. I don't know. I mean, that's weird. I think Red and I may be on the same page. Kassig, what do you think about comparing the value of two contemporary humans?
I think everyone says, oh, it's terrible. No one does that. I think there's actuary sciences where that's exactly what they do. Throughout history, people have had, I think the Weregild is what it was. It was, I think Mandet's the translation, but it's for every rank of person, there was a specific price. And, if you went out and killed a count, you had to pay, it was in shillings, so I don't know how much it actually was, but in the courts, you got to pay this much to their family, tribe. It was feudal society, so if someone owned their labor, you had to. So I think on one hand we say, oh, no one ever does that. It's terrible to do that. On the other hand, I think most choices are pretty easy for people, like bishop's mom. Unless there's mitigating circumstances, bishop's mom. And you could say, oh, we should do it this other way, and we should do it this. But when you look at what people actually do, they judge all the time. You judge with your time. Like, who do you talk to? Who do you don't talk to anymore? You've judged your time more valuable than what they provide, I think. And I know you used to speak about this all the time, where you would say, what are you saying you're doing versus what are you actually doing? And what you're actually doing is what you actually value. And it took a long time to get through, the Gulliver here, but I think that's generally how you look. You have to look at these things. Like, don't look at what they say they do. What do they actually do? That's their value.
God, I think you're right, but now you're speaking to the reason that we're doing this podcast, which I don't know, maybe we never said it. I think it might be worth saying. Getting people to think about ethics compels them to question and investigate and reflect on their own values before they act instinctively and reflexively with those values in a critical time. If you take the time to think about why one human life means more to you than another, then maybe you won't reflexively save your mom instead of the great leading intellectual of the time when there's the burning building. But maybe it takes you having to have thought about that ahead of time and contemplated it to prepare you, let's say, morally for the kinds of circumstances you might encounter. I mean, I think there's great value in what we're doing, especially publicizing it, because we're helping people to plan their morality before they're up against the wall and they have to make a snap decision that they haven't taken time to think about.
And to get back to the value of a human life, I think that's one of the major values of human lives. When we all come together and talk about things and bring up new ways of doing things, or even other ways of doing things, it oftentimes just having something pointed out that you don't see because it's one of your blind spots. A lot of times when a couple other people come together, they can point out what you don't see because it's in your blind spot, and you gain value from that, certainly.
I'm going to put this to you guys. If you're going to go with the train example, sure, we're going to put the baby and the dog on there. What if we put Hitler and Mussolini on there? Now we have to pick one.
Mussolini.
Is it before or after World War II?
At the height of their insanity.
So
or
during
Hitler
World War
and
II, I think Hitler had a bigger body count.
What about Hitler and Genghis Khan?
I think Hitler had a bigger body count, but I don't remember. And I don't know that necessarily quantity of victims is enough, but I don't have any better criteria. I tend to think Hitler, I mean, there are others. You could look at Stalin. Stalin did. His body count was up there too. It might have surpassed Hitler's. I don't know. I think you got to go with the bigger body count.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless there's something else glaring,
But here's the thing. This is all you know. These two people have done very bad things.
Yes.
Pick one.
No.
You've got to pick one.
Or what?
It's the same situation that's given to you as far as the baby or the dog.
What if you don't care and you just say, I don't care who it hits?
Well, I don't care if it derails. I mean, but it's the same.
It's now what's interesting.
That's a good consequence. If you do nothing, the train derails and a third person is just so. That might be a good way to set it up to where you do have to pick.
I'll tell you, I really like Red. Thank you for doing this, because the famous two train track experiment, I think, helps really to bring the question of value of life into clarity. Thank you for doing that. But I got to say, the way you phrased it, I think maybe the difficulty for Kassig is that neither of them are significant enough that he wants to make that decision, because he's probably content whether it kills Mussolini or Hitler or Stalin and Hitler, because either way, you're doing a great good to the world. So what if we phrase it the other way? What if it's Mother Teresa on one track and Gandhi on the other? And now it's not a question of either one's going to wipe out a bunch of evil, and so it's a net good for humanity. But now you're going to lose some great good either way. How do you make the determination between the two goods, which is the one you want to preserve? I mean, now maybe you're more invested as the person pulling the switch to really think about that. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just want to say that may be an inversion of the two train track experiment that's more compelling to the thinker to the philosopher.
That's
Because you
That's
care
what I was
about
going
both.
for. Right. That's what I was going for. I just using the wrong examples.
No, I think both ways it tells you something. They're both, and if I were choosing, I think I'd have to go with total years of doing good. Unless there was like some new teaching or something, I would just go straight up. And I don't know which one lived longer, so probably Mother Teresa, because I
Maybe.
think Gandhi was assassinated.
Gandhi was assassinated, but then I look at, well, what's the total impact? Gandhi essentially
Yeah,
liberated a nation from imperialist oppression, the
right.
subjugation of an entire people, not to mention inspired an entire generation of thinkers.
It's a tough one.
You're talking about very good examples in both cases, and I don't know how you decide between which is the better of two goods. I would love to know. I mean, if you guys have
You
any
know,
insight, tell me, please.
let's make it even worse. Let's make it, you've got baby A and baby B. Both babies are going to do something spectacular and extraordinary with their lives. Which one do you value more? You don't know which one is going to do what.
And you can't sacrifice yourself to save them both.
Nope.
Kind of a coin toss.
I mean,
A coin toss might be better because you can't blame yourself for the result.
You know, there are lots of motivations I think that people listening to your hypothetical, Red, that they would use to make their judgment. Things like gender for the let's say the misogynists, or
Sure.
the race of the baby for the racists. But to make it an even more difficult conundrum, what if they're identical twin babies? So you look at them and they are indistinguishable down to the genetic level. Now
yeah.
we ask ourselves, which is the greater of the two? Because I think the good that we see, and correct me if I'm wrong, the good isn't the current good, it's the potential for future good, I think is what you see in these babies' lives.
The value of the potential good for this person. Which one is more valuable?
Also,
I don't know. I have no idea how one would even make that decision.
So then, if you don't know how you can make that decision on identical twin babies, how can you make that decision versus a dog and a baby?
Um,
Now, I know you've got the higher thing, but if you just take it based off of the value of life,
I,
I can't make a decision.
I'll tell you, Kassig may have a different take on this. You may have a different take. But for me, it's not just the value of life. In fact, life, like biological life, the carbon-based entity that does metabolism, I couldn't give two shits about that aspect of life. That is not the valuable thing at all. To me, it's, believe it or not, it's not even the aesthetics of the body of the person. I mean, you could look at a supermodel and go, man, she's really valuable. Look how much pleasure she gives to everybody that looks at her. I don't think that's the real human value. I think the value comes down to the capacity to have experiences. And maybe now that we're talking about it, it's not just experiences for the self. Maybe we think there's value in a person that chooses to have experiences that benefit other people. I mean, we talk about Gandhi and Mother Teresa. It's not the experiences that they had, it's the choices that they made with their experiences that compelled them to think big and act in ways that impacted beneficially entire generations, all their contemporaries. So when you say, well, the baby versus the dog, I say, well, the baby's the one that's got the capacity to benefit all the living contemporaries, and I don't think the dog's going to do it. Even if it's Lassie or Rin Tin Tin, it might get a good TV show, but aside from making you laugh occasionally, I don't think it's going to benefit all of human life the way one human child potentially could.
Okay.
The thing though is, how do you know that baby's not going to grow up to be the next Hitler or Mussolini or Stalin?
or how do you know that
Right.
the dog isn't going to inspire someone's kid to be the next Gandhi? So it's
Oh, Cujo. I think Stephen King called that dog Cujo.
or saying, it's when you get into that mode, it's tough. You kind of have to go by potential, but who knows? You could be easily wrong.
Well, wait, Red, you asked the question of the two babies, and then we agreed on the most difficult decision to make is the two identical twin babies. What's your reaction, or what's your thought? What's your sense of how to deal with that conundrum?
Honestly, with the value system that I'm holding, let the thing derail. I mean, I can't in any good conscience choose one or over another.
It's weird. It's a lot easier. Boy, I wonder if this is what I'm about to say is controversial. It's a lot easier to judge the value of life of an adult, like a person that's lived longer, than a
Yeah.
younger person, because you have a bigger body of evidence to see what they will have done with their potential. You know,
Yeah.
it's almost easy to judge an old person. Just look at their track record.
Yeah.
Yeah, people can change, but it happens about once. People hit middle age and change. Other than that, it's kind of rare. It's got to be a special type of person because the known is comfortable. It's tough to get out of that rut.
Yeah, there's one last kind of tack that I want to take here, and I'm realizing we're over our time now. But before I go down that path, because it's a little bit different, it's a little bit of a meta level to this question. Is there anything else about like comparative value assignments or value of life that you guys want to talk about? Because I know before we had this discussion, we all seem to have a lot of pretty intense thoughts about this topic. So
Well, and it's a personal choice a lot of times. So yeah, heartfelt opinion. It's all the choices are very personal. It comes down to what we believe and all of that. And I think it all can be reduced down ultimately. And it's mostly we do things we like, we avoid things we don't like.
I like I said when we first started, I personally think everything has value, has an equal value in the grand scheme of things. And I'm not talking just humans and dogs and cats and flies and grass. I mean, it's dirt and it's wood and it's everything has a value. And it's not just because of what kind of production they can do. My life isn't more valuable than your life because of my job and your job. My job is just a job. Your job is just a job. It's what we do with it that makes our lives valuable, kind of, I think.
Well, that's why we have these. That's why we have these discussions so we can.
who's the arbiter of whether or not you or I or any other person has lived up, let's say, to their potential, or has, regardless of their potential, done the greatest good? If you want to look at it from a consequentialist way. I mean, who decides whether consequences of a person's actions over the course of their life are in fact net beneficial or net detrimental? I mean, to me, that sounds subjective too.
I don't think any one person can decide it.
Who can decide it?
I think we do decide it. I don't know if we judge every day.
I think that's what humans do. It's just we constantly judge. We do value assignment in our brains. Every time we perceive something, we assign a value to it, and we do it unconsciously for the most part. We don't even think about it. We see two people, and there are characteristics of this person that makes me like them more than them. I value this person more than that person. And that's like everybody's doing that all the time, not just with people, but with all the things they encounter. I guess that's kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about, was that this notion that values are synthetic. And it was sort of interesting as we were doing the research. It doesn't look like anybody has pushed the envelope quite as far as what we've been talking about, which is if all value assignments are synthetic, then there's no such thing as objective value. There's certainly no such thing as inherent value. It's all assigned. It's all external, subjective. You imagine a value that when you perceive something and you assign it to it, and then that value assignment exists in your mind. And maybe you can communicate that value assignment to someone else. You can express it to them when you talk to them. You could explicitly say, hey, this thing's more valuable than that for this reason. Maybe you just communicate those value assignments whenever you talk to someone. And in doing so, you program them to adopt, at least theoretically, your value assignments. But what I'm getting at is there's no inherent value, and that means there's no such thing as objective value. We can't say that there's a value that stands independent of the observer. All value assignments are synthetic and subjective. We make them up. And to me, it seems like this ethics, this is really just normative. We're just trying to get to what we think is the truth and then communicate that as widely as possible so that we get, like what Kassig was describing a few episodes ago, we get that virtual objective value, where it's not actually objective, but it's so widely held, this subjective value, it might as well be treated as an objective. It moves from being a personal value assignment into something we call a virtue. And we talk about the virtues and we share those with other people. Is that controversial, even though we're breaking new ground here, I think? Or is everybody sort of on the same page with subjective value?
I kind of agree with the objective value that everybody... See, now I don't think I can. Because I believe everybody has a value. I don't assign you a value. You already have that value in the system that in this whole, I don't know, global, universal, whatever system you want to call it. Everybody has their inherent value, and it's already predetermined because when you... Oh, man, I'm having trouble spitting this out.
I think I get what you're saying. So you're arguing for innate value. Do you think things have innate value? Now, you mentioned people, but do you think that's true of like non-humans, like other animals and plants and even like rocks and minerals and like
Oh, yeah.
wood and structures, houses. Everything has value. So let me ask you this. If in some hypothetical thought experiment, all the humans in a blink of an eye disappeared, they all ceased to exist, do all those objects still have the innate value?
Yeah.
Yep.
They do.
Yeah.
And who is that value? Who holds that value? Who uses that value? Who?
The other animals.
Okay, let's say all the animals disappeared in a blink and we're left with only, and all the plants are gone too. We're just left with inanimate matter, objects all over the place, artifacts from human existence, and then all the rocks that were there beforehand. Do they still have value?
Because life can redevelop, yes. So I think the life is the important part.
So let's say there's a toxin on the world that will prevent life from developing ever again, and all the humans and all the animals and all the plants are gone. Do all the objects in the world still have value?
Sure. I mean, the planet still has value. The planet still holds a piece of a little tract of land in the cosmos, which develops and bounces off its own magnetic energy and blah blah blah, and keeps everything. If the Earth goes out of whack on its orbit, it's going to mess up the orbit of other planets, and then it's going to mess up the orbit of the solar system. Then it's going to mess up the orbit of this and this and this, and it just keeps going on. So yeah, it's still got value.
I'm trying to think of how best to articulate this. I think that what's happening is it has value to you. It has value in your mind. And what I'm trying to do is describe a thought experiment in which there are no minds, there are no consciousnesses at all anywhere in the universe, nor is there the potential for any future consciousness. And I'm asking, in the absence of the possibility of consciousness, does value still exist innately in the thing? And so we're not retreading the same ground. Let me describe what I think is going on. I think that there's two different ways to describe any given object: qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative ways, you say, ooh, this thing is red, this thing is warm, this thing is soft or hard. And then there's quantitative. You say it has a value of +3. This has a value of -5. And what I'm saying is the concept of values is limited to the quantitative realm. It has nothing to do with the qualitative realm. And what I'm saying is the notion of the quantitative realm, the universe where quantities exist, that's a hypothetical universe that exists only in the minds of consciousnesses, of humans. Humans dream up this notion of numbers. And then they arbitrarily assign that, and they say that they're ordinal. They follow a sequence, 0, 1, 2, 3. And they say as the sequence progresses, the value that we associate with each numeric entry in that sequence increases. But that's all synthetic. That's all made up crap. I mean, Red, you got to appreciate calling shenanigans, right? That's what you said in episodes before. You say, oh, now you're philosophizing, and that's bullshit. And I'm saying that the notion of values, this idea of quantitative value, that's synthetic. That's happening only in the mind of a consciousness, which means that if there's anything that's bullshit, it's quantitative value. I mean, qualitative value, we can say based on observation. When I see a wavelength of light at this frequency, I'm going to call it red. You're going to call it red. He's going to call it red. But to say that this is a frequency of 1.315, whatever, that's made up. There is no such thing as 1.315 in nature. That's purely synthetic. That was devised by humans, and it was a system of bullshit that was written down and shared widely that we now call mathematics, and we say that's the foundation of all of our knowledge. And what I'm saying is, if there ever was crap, it's that notion. It's quantitative valuation.
I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and I think instead of saying like the world's constructed or it's an illusion or something like that, it's all overlays. We're putting our conceptual overlay over everything else. We're making maps of everything that sometimes don't actually conform to the territory. But I think knowing that it's just maps, you can still use the map and it can still have value. But it's not. It's an overlay. It's representing something of itself. So it's synthetic in and of itself.
It's synthetic and it's utilitarian. It's made by your mind and it's useful to your mind as a way to categorize your thoughts about things and then act accordingly. And that's what I'm saying all value assignment is. It's just your mind's way of saying, this thing is worth more than that thing. So if I have to choose between the two, I choose this thing and I reject that thing.
Yeah. The only way you could have objective value is if the universe was conscious. If consciousness was everywhere, then you could say it's all we even say it's all interrelational too. But as a whole, it would be valuable to itself if it were conscious. If it's not, I think consciousness is the main driver of that.
I think
Or
you're right.
awareness at least. Awareness at least.
I think you're right. I think you're speculating metaphysically, and I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm not going to dispute it because it's very possible what you're saying. It's incredibly plausible. It would explain a lot if, in fact, the universe itself was conscious. However, what I'm saying is it's beyond the scope of what we're doing now, and we have no test that you and I could even agree on to verify that the universe has consciousness. So in the absence of that, let's just return to phenomenology and say it appears to be what it appears to be.
Sure.
And right now we're not seeing evidence of consciousness. And in the absence of that, I think you and I can probably agree phenomenologically, we are seeing evidence of consciousness in humans. They're the things that seem to have it in spades. And it seems
that was just more of a, the only way I could see it happening is if this were true, which, we go back to the phenomenology. But yeah, I think a lot of all that stuff is made up by the mind. It's an overlay onto reality by the mind. And who knows how much of I think our overlay of reality counts as what we perceive as reality a lot more than we think it does.
Red, what I was saying, I didn't use the terminology that Kassig did there, but I think his terminology is good. When he talks about overlays, I'm saying there has to be a mind to create the overlay and to overlay it onto the perceptions. In the absence of the mind, there is no overlay, and even if the overlay is written down for another mind to conceive it, it requires that there be another mind to pick up the overlay, the map, the tool, call it mathematics or whatever, and apply it. If all the minds are gone, if all the humans are gone, the consciousness is gone, then all those maps are completely irrelevant. They weren't speaking to some value that was innate in the thing. They were speaking to synthetic values created by the people that devised the map maker. I mean, to me, that's really what values are. It's the artifacts of the map maker, these mental map makers, the mathematicians, the scientists, the whatever. I don't know if that seems off the rails for you, or if you just reject some of my premises, or
I wouldn't say reject, but there are a few things that I just can't agree with, and I can't explain exactly why I don't agree with. Because when I start to explain it in my head, it's like, okay, the rock without any carbon-based life forms, period, is useless. It does not have value. But even if there is a blade of grass, that rock has value. So, and that blade of grass isn't conscious, but it does have a life force. So those two things are equally valuable now.
Well, wait a second. That last piece I don't agree with, but everything up to that, I think you were articulating utilitarian ethics, which means you and I are on the same page. So you said the rock by itself doesn't have value, but if there's even a blade of grass, the rock has value. Well, the piece I think that you're not saying there, but that you're implicitly meaning, is that the rock has value to the blade of grass. And I think that's the key to utilitarianism. Utility doesn't stand independent of the agent. It's got to be useful to someone or something for it to be useful. You can't just say the rock sitting in a vacuum is useful. Useful to who? Useful to what? Oh, well, it's useful to the blade of grass. So its value is contingent upon the existence of the blade of grass. And I'm saying that take that to its logical conclusion, and all values are contingent upon the humans, who are the ones that are assigning the values as a way to maximize their quality of life in their decision-making process. If the humans are gone, the value goes away.
The dinosaurs had no humans involved with their living, and they needed grass, they needed soil, they needed trees. There were no humans to.
For them. It was for them.
Right.
If they go away, the value doesn't stay. The value disappears with them, because the value was relative to them.
But that doesn't mean that even afterward they weren't valuable.
Right.
Well, they were valuable. They were valuable in producing enough oxygen and carbon dioxide and everything else to continue the prolonging of the Earth and being able to create other life forms.
Red, is it so that you value life? Like you say, as long as there's life, then it's all interrelated and valuable to each other's, to all life? Is it just sort of a, is it where, because I think that's kind of where you're describing value for life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't believe that there is a quantitative, is that what you said, where you assign it a number? I don't believe that. I think everything's value is zero because the value to this person is all the same.
Life.
People, it's all for life. People assign other forms of value to it because they think that they're better than others.
So
When
they
you
assign
get the,
higher value to themselves than to the collective.
correct.
But that doesn't mean that the value assignment isn't synthetic and perspectival. It is. That's the person manufacturing a value and of greater than all the other values they manufactured and assigning it to themselves. You take that person out of the equation and all of the value assignments that existed in their mind go with them, because the values weren't speaking about the things they were assigning the value to. They were speaking about their utility, those things' utility to the agent that dreamed up the value assignment.
It's a question in terms. It seems like the vocabulary is not the best for this. Because I think there is agreement. I think getting to that agreement is becoming difficult. Yeah,
I think this is what I think. We are all saying pretty much close to the same thing, but we're all saying it. We have very certain things that are very different to each other. Like, I don't believe that there's a number value, whereas Chunky, you do. The only number value to anything is zero because we're all equally valued to each other. I may have. Okay, you're shaking your head.
No, yeah, we're not. We're not. I agree that mathematics and numeric values are synthetic. They were devised by humans. But I would say that humans very much use those numeric values in their decision-making process. In fact, that's the backbone of their decision-making process. They may not express it numerically in their mind, but they absolutely are using numeric evaluation. They're using quantitative evaluations of their perceptions to decide which one is considered more useful to them, and then they act in accord with whatever they think is most useful. I think that's what humans do in every moment. That seems to be like the heart of human agency. Their decision making and their activities is all about the value assignments that they make in their mind to their perceptions. That's what guides them. That's why you choose to eat, let's say, a hamburger versus a plate full of kale, I think. And I think that those values are aesthetic. I think it comes down to the pleasure that you get flavor-wise, the olfactory pleasure you get from the taste of the hamburger versus the taste of the kale, I think. I'm sure I just offended a bunch of kale eaters out there, but I have to use something here for an example.
I like kale.
Sorry.
Throw you under the bus there a bit.
So what's interesting is, for him, and this is actually a great example, for him, and he's making a joke here, but let's say he actually did. Let's say he was a vegetarian and he loved kale. And he's like, not only do I love kale, but I hate the killing of meat for consumption by humans. The killing of animals to generate meat for consumption by humans. For him, the values are inverted, but he's still using synthetic value assignments in his mind. It speaks to his priorities, his experiences, the aesthetics that he gets, the aesthetic utility he gets from the experiencing of one thing versus another. Maybe it's the flavor of the kale. Maybe it's the conceptual disdain for harming what he thinks or terminating unnecessarily the life of a living thing, because maybe he considers that valuable.
Well, there's also the joy of being the self-righteous about it, which occasionally happens. Do you know how terrible your dinner is? It's like, well, we're both killing things to survive, so it's a matter of degrees at some point. So, but I think people do that. They like their righteousness. I think we want to believe that we live in a good world and that we're good people. And we'll go through some weird, look at the Crusades as a way that we will do horrible things to make sure that idea stays, our rationalization stay intact. But yeah, I think it does revolve around mind and life as to how things are valuable. Consciousness, I don't know. I think life can gain value from something without quantifying it mentally. Plants in the sun are an obvious example. But yeah, I think mostly at the end of the day, it is mostly utilitarian. And most of our vaulted, self-righteous nonsense, you can break it down to how it directly makes us happy and, fulfills our concept of what we should be doing and all that. And yeah, I think without life, there isn't any meaning.
I agree with that. I think meaning is strictly in the mental domain of humans. By the way, I suspect that I hate to use the term lower, but let's say less complex life forms, the dog, for example. I don't think the dog is making up meaning in their minds. I'm not saying they're not conscious or aware. I know that Kassig and I had a debate about what constitutes consciousness versus awareness, and it's nebulous because it's difficult to devise experiments to determine that. But I think we could look at a dog and say it appears to have some level of consciousness, some level of awareness. I do not think that dog is making up meaning at all. I don't think that dog's doing complex reasoning at all the way humans do. And for that reason alone, when I compare the human to the dog on the train track experiment, it's a no-brainer to me to go, of course. It's not that I want to harm the dog, but the human is just so much more valuable because of its capacity for abstract reasoning that the dog doesn't have. But again, that's my value assignment. That's me imagining that complexity and self-reflectiveness is a thing that makes an entity valuable. I'm not saying that's universally true. I don't think it has any inherent value. I'm saying it just has more value to me.
I think see what I value is the continuation of life, and that's my primary goal. If humans have to be gone for that to happen, oh well, maybe the next species will figure it out. But it ultimately comes from more life surviving, so that more, hopefully better suited intelligences can develop.
See, and this is what I was getting at. Do you value life for the sake of life because the thing you find valuable is metabolism, or do you value life for its capacity to evolve to the point that it has a consciousness and
Yes.
can be self-reflective and have experiences?
Yes, I think I appreciate that. If it would prove to never happen, then it's to me the consciousness and the complex consciousness is most important. But that's because we have complex so.
But Kassig, I think you and I in that case are on the same page because I say
Sure.
It's not really the life itself that you find valuable, only in a utilitarian way, only in that the life serves as the substrate upon which consciousness can emerge, and it's consciousness which is the really valuable thing.
Yes.
I mean, what do you think, Red? Do you agree with that, at least, regardless of the objective versus subjective value debate? Do you agree that the thing that makes life valuable is its capacity for consciousness?
I don't know.
Fair enough.
Because grass is valuable. Cows are valuable. I'm valuable. Grass doesn't have consciousness, but it's still valuable.
Valuable to you because it feeds the animals that feed you.
Right.
Okay, so it's really you that you value, and then the grass and the animals that eat it, and then those are animals that you eat. Their utility, their value is all conditional upon you. It's all utilitarian. It serves the purpose of furthering your existence, because that I think is ultimately what you value. Not innately, but to a greater extent than you value the things that support it. Let's say. I look at it like a pyramid, right? And at the top of the pyramid is you. And then underneath it are maybe the animals that you eat, and underneath them are the plants that they eat, and underneath them are the rocky planet that they all live on, and underneath that is the solar system, and underneath that is the universe, which is the substrate on which it's all built. But it's still a pyramid, and at the top of your pyramid is you. And so all those things exist to serve you, to serve your continued existence, so that you can have experiences. If you fall off the top of the pyramid, does it really matter whether the rest of the pyramid is still in place, is my question.
I think you could also put the people you value at the top of the pyramid too, and that might make it make the decision more cut and dry. Because you could say, not at the top of the pyramid, that's sheer self-centeredness, and that's bad. Which, if it goes, I think moderation's the key, and if you go overboard to anything, it's not that good. But
I think I'm going to go with Chunky's pyramid here, and if we're going to go with that, at the top of the pyramid is me. Then that means then Kassig, I can't put anybody else up there with me.
No, imagine, let's just say your family is on the top of the pyramid.
But they're only useful to me. Not as useful as me.
Well done, Red. I think you're right. I think that's the secret hidden egoism behind everybody's behavior. Even those that are most selfless, they say, I'm doing this for humanity. Well, you're doing it because the preservation and promotion of the existence of humanity pleases you. I mean, we can talk about Gandhi and Mother Teresa and these other people that we glorify and beatify and say they're like saints. Yeah, but if they didn't see beauty, let's say, in the life of their contemporaries, would they have worked so hard to preserve and promote the welfare of their contemporaries? I think Red's right, Kassig, and I appreciate what you were trying to do by by making it a more cut and dry pyramid, but there's that hidden secret that at the top of every pyramid, whether you list it or not, is the individual. It's the person that's perceiving the value of everything below it.
And, as long as you can promote your own self-values, as long as you don't cut other people's values for your own profit, A certain amount of self-centeredness isn't a terrible thing. It's just when you as the center become more important than other people as going out and screwing people over for your own, but looking after your own self-interest isn't necessarily as negative as I think people label it as, because it's got a bad reputation. Because when people do go over the limit and go into this, I'm the most important thing, everyone else is not important, obviously bad things happen. But I think there's a healthy limit. There's a healthy amount of that
of self-interest.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I don't know what that limit is, and if we could ever codify that, figure out what the extent of healthy self-interest is, that would be valuable.
Well, and I think I think you might be getting some pushback on the self-interest thing just because that term has such a negative kind of. When in reality, you can break down most decisions into you think your idea is good and right, and the other option's bad. It's just, but I do think it is all mind when it comes to importance.
I don't know.
Sorry,
Red,
I keep trying to read.
Have we swayed you at all, or are you all the more entrenched in your original beliefs?
If anything, you haven't swayed. You've kind of added to it and changed it a little bit. But I still believe everything is, yes, it is for me. Everything is valuable to me, whether I say it is equal value or this is more valuable than this. But yeah, you're right. It's all about me. It's all about you at your pyramid. No, I don't think you can put other people onto the top of your pyramid, because then it's not your pyramid anymore. It's their pyramid now.
Gotcha.
Because how can this pyramid be about me if there's someone else up here with me?
And you could just say it's a group of pyramids just as easily,
Sure, it is. But yeah, no, I think everything. I think I'm going to stand with a variation of what I started with. It's very utilitarian for me, and I still believe everything has its own value equal to the next thing.
And I just like to say tonight, thanks for being the punching bag. Just because, it's a great discussion, and it needs to be broken down and all that. And I just wanted to say it's not antagonistic at all. Just.
I apologize if it seemed antagonistic. I don't want to punch on anyone. I don't want to make anyone the punching bag.
I will be your lightning rod of hate. I don't care.
I have no hate. I really appreciate this. And yeah, it was not meant to be antagonistic, and I apologize if it got contentious.
I don't think it was contentious. I just rather have everything out in the open.
It was a little frustrating at times, but it wasn't. It wasn't an attack or anything like that. So no worries.
I will say, and boy, this is a great episode. We actually went over 90 minutes on this one. But I will mention that I think what Red was articulating there, and again, I'll try to find the footnote to verify this, but he's advocating what I think is an ethical philosophy I think it's called instrumental egoism, but I'm not sure if my terminology is right. I'll look it up and I'll put a footnote in there to verify it. And I think that's actually a pretty widely held belief, ethical belief that it explains why people act in accord with their own interests, generally speaking.
Okay.
Anyway, this was great. Thanks. I'm not sure if we came to a conclusion, but I think we did a pretty deep dive there on value of life and value in general. So hopefully it was enlightening for the viewers, maybe thought-provoking. For the viewers, I will say, those out there watching it, if you like the things that we're talking about, or specifically like episodes like this where maybe we didn't come exactly to a consensus, but we brought up a lot of interesting ideas. If you want to comment, please put a comment on the video. We love to get feedback and see what people think, and that even can help us shape our future discussions. So anyway, all feedback is welcome and appreciated. So our schedules are kind of up in the air. We don't really have plans yet for when the next episode will be. When we get around to it, we will get around to it. I will say that offline here, before this discussion started, we had a couple of interesting ideas that we were kicking around, and I think episode 12 is going to dig a little bit deeper into maybe not so much the value of a person, but the behaviors of a person that we think are the things that we would want them to pursue, the things that we would consider ideal for, like, let's say, a citizen or a person, an individual, an adult.
Or your neighbor might be a good way to.
Your neighbor and you and all your contemporaries.
Like, what? How do you want your neighbor to act? Are you acting like that?
Right, exactly. So anyway, that's gonna be a good one too. With that, I think anybody have any other closing thoughts?
I value you all.
Thank you. Feeling
even if it's a selfish value,
I selfishly value all of you very much, and thank you for taking time to talk about all of our selfishness and how we share that value.
We can all be selfish in a healthy way. We can get things together.
That's what we're doing, I think.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, that was very good. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Thanks for those that watched. Thanks for those that participated. And we will see you all in a little bit for episode 12.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
Yeah, bye-bye.
See ya. The opinions expressed in the preceding podcast are not necessarily those of the individuals who expressed those opinions. The creators and participants of this podcast hereby absolve themselves of any and all liability for damages that might arise as a result of the viewing, hearing, or acting upon the ideas expressed in this podcast. By watching or listening to this podcast, you hereby agree to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the creators and participants of this podcast from any and all claims, demands, damages, or liabilities resulting from the experiencing of the contents of this podcast.